I'm Linda Moulton Howe. I've been at this for a very long time, and I've had corrective surgery done. Am I shocking you? Welcome to Parapod, everybody. Come on, let's go. That is not loud enough. Parapod. I am so excited. We have been working on this event for 2 years, and later on tonight we'll be doing the awards and everything. But Tony's focus was the best and the brightest, and who do we get from our community that best represents us? I mean, at the top of the list, of course, Linda Moulton Howe. So she's here, and we know she's right there, but her contribution to this community is something that cannot be measured. Her effortless, tireless work. 82 years old. 82. And that's a round of applause right there. No, 81, she's gonna be 82. Linda's like, I didn't take that last trip around the sun yet, Jimmy. Yeah, 81. Earlier this week, Linda and I'm going to make this quick. She's got an amazing presentation she's about to do. Earlier this week, I had her on the show, and we were talking earlier, I don't know how many interviews we have done. I don't know how many phone calls that last for hours that we have had and discussed, but we are very close friends. And the honor and the privilege for Linda to let me into her circle of trust, it's just, I can't believe how I got here. She's the absolute very best. She's a dear friend, but she's where I go for questions. She's where I go for answers. The Earth Files. A round of applause. Earth Files. So, before I bring her up, I just want to say one thing. When I need material for my show, I go to Earth Files. There it is, I've confessed. I go to Earth Files. I'll call Linda. What's going on? That's how important Earth Files and her work is. She's been at this for 40 years. She's been all around the world. I have presented awards to her at conferences. I introduce her at every conference. Today is no less special than anything else I've done with this woman over the years. Parapod 2023 welcomes to the stage, get loud, Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, come on.
Construct the stage as we go. Yeah. All right. I wanted to do a presentation in this first Parapod that relates to what I think is the single most important subject when it comes to understanding the universe that we are in and the advanced intelligences that have learned how to move in the deep tunnel fabric at the quantum level. And that the key, as an aerospace scientist said to me about 6 years ago, Linda, the key to everything that is advanced are frequencies. And the simplest way to think of a frequency is anything that you have a lower and an upper margin, and it's just what is happening in here. And that this presentation evolved from nearly 3,000 interviews that I have done since 1979 with people in the human abduction syndrome. And one of the most common descriptions in all of those abduction interviews is, quote, I hear a buzzing like bees, and then I see a glowing sphere at the foot of the bed, and the next thing I know, I'm floating on my back from the bed to the window, and Linda, I go right through the window. Others experience rising upward right through the ceiling. One man in Brazil told me that he was in bed when a pinkish red glowing beam came down around him, and then his body rose up in the beam, quote, right through the ceiling, and it felt like thousands of little feathers tickling my skin. Frequencies, the beams, bodies, matter, light, energy. It is all at the advanced level, the controlling of frequencies. Another abductee in New York City remembers being on a UFO high above Earth as non-humans telepathically explained they want humans to evolve from low third dimension in matter to higher frequencies of light, that is their vested interest. From our brains to galaxies, the key is frequencies, and here is one of the most important images that I have seen in the last few years. On the left is an actual neuron network of a mouse brain. The image on the right is a 2 billion year old cubic region of our universe, and they look identical. For those of you who have heard me talk on Earth Files and on my Earth Files YouTube channel about Robert Bohm and his brilliant book, Wholeness and the Implicate Order, for the remainder of today, I hope you will keep in mind that frequency may be what is bound in the wholeness of the implicate order, meaning everything from the subatomic level to the macro level is operating in a wholeness of concept, a wholeness of the relationship of frequencies. It is the key to everything. And looking at the mouse tissue and a cubic area of galaxies, and they look identical. It is just a matter of size. One is in the micro level, one is in the macro. But the wholeness, the implicate order, is that we are in a universe that from the micro to the macro, the exact same rules apply. And the extraterrestrials that are advanced, they understand this, and they know how not only to move 50 light years in 5 days in our particular galaxy, but they know how to use frequencies in which they can go from 3 to 4 to 5, up to 10, 11, or 12, depending on who you're referencing, in terms of other dimensional frequencies. And that is also how they can compress time by moving in and out of dimensions. Keeping all of that as a background, I'm going to begin with what I think is a very important quote from an astrophysicist, Franco Vazza. Quote, "There is a whole universe in your brain, but did you ever think that your brain could be a reflection of the vast universe out there? The biggest difference between our brains and the universe is how they process information content. In the case of the cosmic web, this is the three-dimensional structure of galaxies. In the human brain, information processing is recorded through the local connectivity of neurons. Some calculations suggest that the computing power of the human brain, your brain, could be 10 to the 17th power faster than the cosmic web. We don't fully understand what we humans are." Now, moving to a little background about me, I graduated in 1968 from Stanford University with a master's degree in communication, where I produced documentaries at the Stanford Medical Center and the Stanford Linear Accelerator, and I reported for the Stanford Chaparral News. And my goal was to report about science, environment, and medical breakthroughs in TV news. I worked for KNBC in Los Angeles, WCVB, the ABC affiliate in Boston, and then I became director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver, where I produced, wrote, directed, edited documentary films on flatbeds, like the one in this photo. And I also produced live studio audience productions about Colorado environment, technology, and science issues, including NASA astronaut training at Martin Marietta, south of Denver. Then in the summer of 1979, news erupted in Colorado about bloodless, trackless mutilations of cattle, horses, and other domestic and wild animal mutilations, in which there was no blood on the cuts, no tracks around the dead animal bodies, even when animals were lying in dry grass and dust. Even stranger, some animals had missing internal organs such as hearts without any surgical cuts into the chest or the body, and veterinarians had no answers. And then when I contacted retired Logan County Sheriff Tex Graves, who had investigated dozens of bloodless mutilation cases, he told me, quote, "Linda, the perpetrators of these bloodless animal mutilations are creatures from outer space," close quote. And I remember distinctly, as if it were a second ago, that when he said those words to me, looking eye to eye, I felt throughout my entire body a physical, painful, electric shock. It was as if my very soul jumped at the realization to know that day with the sheriff that this was the collapse of past, present, and future in this particular human being's life on earth, mine, and that it was the turning point of my entire existence. As if I were plucked from one path without UFOs and ETs in it onto another path in which UFOs, ETs, and the high strangeness of this universe would dominate my work and my life for the next, now, 42 years, up to this 2021 or 23 Parapod conference. But back in 1979, I did not understand the irony that as I pursued answers to who or what was mutilating domestic and wild animals all over the world, that I was making contact, so to speak, opening my mind for the first time in my life to the actual existence of other life in this universe. And with every night watch that my crew and I saw strange moving lights in the sky above pastures, with every rancher who saw light beams projected from round lights in the sky, that ranchers would watch an animal going up in a beam of light, or report seeing an animal coming down in the beam of light. With every mile that I traveled to ranches to gather tissues for pathology investigations, and with every broken hip and leg bones that meant the mutilated animals were being dropped from a high altitude onto the ground, my mind was opening to the reality of other life forms interacting with our planet. But why? Why would they be harvesting tissues and fluids from so many Earth animals? How were they extracting large hearts and other organs from inside grown cows without any external cuts on the body and not a drop of blood inside the cow's chest? Could there be an existential survival urgency for the alien perpetrators? If we knew who they were and why they needed organic tissues from Earth, would we humans feel compassion for them, the aliens, instead of anger and fear? Could Earth's first trade route with another life form in this universe be to sell farm animals to ETs, a discussion I had with many ranchers between 1979 and today, and the vast majority said, If it's true, if they're extraterrestrials, they come from another solar system and they need something here, then by God, pay me for the animals that you take. Over the next 9 months in 1979, I had a child, I had a husband, we had dogs, we had cats. But I ended up working 18-hour days without let up for 9 solid months. There was not one break. And that's what it took to investigate animal mutilations and produce the 90-minute documentary that I called A Strange Harvest. And the audience that night at that first broadcast was the largest ever for a Denver station-produced program. There had been nothing like it up to May 25th, 1980, and nothing since. Why is that significant? It meant that people were tuning in from beyond Colorado, and we reached beyond the state of Colorado, and that it meant a lot of people knew a lot about animal mutilations, whether they were admitting it or not. At the station, the switchboard could not keep up with all of the phone calls that were coming in. The mail started being delivered to my office in huge gray, then post office canvas bags. Sometimes I got 3 a day. The letters were coming not just from the United States, I was getting letters with drawings from all over the world. And I didn't know that I was only scratching the surface of what I would come to see is like a 16-layer chess game. Professional controlled remote viewers working for the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C. in that same 1970s decade were reporting confidentially in their classified program that this universe is teeming with consciousness and other life forms. Our government knew that long, long ago. And all those trained remote viewers also reported that when it came to alien agendas, there were friendlies, neutrals, and hostiles. But why? Why would the most recent standing up primates on Earth that we call Homo sapiens sapien have any enemies when we are a baby civilization in the big cosmic scheme of things? And why can't we humans meet the friendly straightforwardly, right out front, who the remote viewers say do help protect humanity from the hostiles? And it was not until my first 3 books had been released between 1989 and 1999 that I received an invitation from a man who worked for the World Bank to meet an analyst retiring from the Defense Intelligence Agency who knew a great deal about extraterrestrial biological entities. The 3 of us traveled to a neutral location chosen by the DIA agent. When we sat down, his first words were, "I don't think our satellites can penetrate this white noise," quote unquote. We were surrounded by water and boat engines, and he talked to me for the next 7 hours. And he began, quote, "My work for the DIA has been to monitor and analyze 3 competing extraterrestrial civilizations that use Earth as a laboratory for all kinds of genetic manipulations and terraforming. Our government has proof they have fought over the Earth laboratory, those 3 civilizations, for at least 270 million years. And just to update you, 1 year ago, from a person who was retiring from one of the United States' largest aerospace corporations, sent me a note and said, "I have heard you describe the DIA who told you about 3 competing civilizations fighting on this planet for 270 million years. Linda, the refined, correct timeline is 278 million years, and the DIA analyst was telling you the truth when he said, our government has absolute proof." of the competition of 3 extraterrestrial civilizations here for 278 million years. And I would suggest to all of you who are seriously interested in understanding the bigger picture, start doing investigations of the timeline at 278 million years ago. When I asked the DIA analyst, what proof does the government have? He said, quote, "It is too dangerous for both of us to discuss, even in this white noise that we were surrounded by." But he told me astonishing details about the symbiotic existence of alien intelligences based deep underground, deep underwater basins, and deep inside mountains on this planet. Their technologies neutralize gravity, provide complete invisibility, and 3-dimensional holographic camouflage that deceive humans every square inch of this planet. The variety of forms in which the aliens appear suggests not only different octaves of intelligence, but mixed forces at work with mixed motives within those octaves, in which frequencies are the key to everything that they do, camouflage, and use for disappearance. No matter what our defense strategies and technologies are, the human race is weakened by ignorance about the situation. History teaches us that often the common good is better served if state secrets are open to public consideration. For if there is one truth that humans have a right to share, it is that something is tampering with this planet physically, psychologically, and spiritually. Humanity deserves the truth, especially if that truth requires a revolutionary new perspective about our history and our future. I am convinced that a common source of energy pervades all there is and can be an ally to living consciousness. And that energy, I think, moves in cycles, like this spiral found on ancient rocks in England, Ireland, and the island of Crete, dating at least 4,000 years before Christ. Part of the old symbol's meaning is that the machinery of this universe involves the evolution of souls. The spirals are not static, and they are not two-dimensional. The symbol is a slice. A larger reality can be imagined as a spiral upward and downward through innumerable other frequencies or dimensions. Ancient wisdom understood that the moment of death was simply a transition into another frequency on the spiral. So all lines in all directions are simultaneous and filled with life forms ebbing and flowing. They are supported by a singular force, an invisible matrix of energy from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. This is a toy hologram projector that projects 3-dimensional dinosaurs and other creatures. And do you remember the hologram of Princess Leia projected by R2-D2 in Star Wars when we could hear her desperately calling Skywalker for help? These holograms are not photographs. They are not using trick mirrors. The word hologram comes from ancient Greek, in which holo means whole and gram means to record and write all lines of letters. It is a system that collects and stores a 3-dimensional virtual object that is not really there, but was originally a 3D object that the holographic recording system preserved as a frequency memory. The first time I heard someone say, "This is a holographic universe," it was Bud Hopkins in 1991 after a Midwest UFO conference. Bud had written the book Missing Time about people who describe being taken into UFOs by non-human beings. And at that 1991 conference, everyone was talking about a newly released book entitled The Holographic Universe. It was written by a man named Michael Talbot, and the subtitles on the book's cover were, somehow it's constantly going out of sync, so I'll just keep fighting the computer for you. And the subtitles on the book's cover were, "A remarkable new theory of reality that explains the paranormal abilities of the mind, the latest frontiers of physics, and the unsolved riddles of brain and body." The author, Michael Talbot, was only 38 years old, and his mind-blowing hypothesis that our universe was being projected by something else from another universe or another dimension was the topic of many discussions at that 1991 conference with Bud. And afterward, I lived in Philadelphia at the time, he lived in New York, and we ended up on the same flight going back east from the conference. And we sat next to each other on the plane to talk about some new abduction cases, and he surprised me when he said, "Linda, I'll tell you something confidentially. Michael Talbot has been one of my UFO abduction cases, but he doesn't want anyone to know because he's afraid if people knew the truth, they might not read his book." And Michael told me the truth is that our entire universe is a hologram, a concept that he has written about and was given to him in a telepathic download by the extraterrestrials who have been abducting him, close quote. Sadly, Michael Talbot died 1 year later at age 39 from lymphocytic leukemia. And then Bud Hopkins died in 2011. And now it is 2023. And that the work of Michael Talbot, back then at the beginning of the 1990s, is reinforced today more and more by some astrophysicists who are now even writing papers that are making it into major scientific journals that hypothesize our universe is a 3D hologram projected from another dimension. At the beginning of 2017, scientists from England, Canada, and Italy published in the Physical Review Letters what they call substantial evidence that our universe is holographic. And this is one of their research illustrations where time runs left to right. On the far left is the gray and blurry holographic projection, not yet well defined, that carries imprints of information to build stars and galaxies. And then the far right is the 3D holographic projection's geometric phase of trillions of galaxies where Einstein's equations apply and energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. It is those imprints of information in our universe's oldest 13.8 billion year old microwave background radiation that suggest we are in a holographic projected universe. On Earth, our lives are dominated by solid matter. But people who have had near-death experiences or have traveled out of body or have been abducted by alien intelligences return to tell us that our matter world is a three-dimensional illusion projected from two-dimensional, what are called by physicists, flat sheets imprinted with information.
You and I, and everything around us, appear to exist in 3 dimensions. Up and down, front and back, left to right. But appearances can be deceptive. Many physicists now believe that reality is not, in fact, 3-dimensional. Instead, they think that the fundamental core of reality comes written in 2-dimensional sheets, like this piece of paper. In this view, our world is a 3-dimensional projection of information that's written on a 2-dimensional surface, an illusion much like a hologram. Clearly, this is insane. What are these sheets? Why would anyone think that reality is 2-dimensional when everything we know appears in 3 dimensions? The answer lies in black holes. Black holes famously suck in everything around them and never let go. But what would happen if you were to throw something with a lot of information into a black hole? Something like a book or a hard drive. Physicists know that information can never be lost, only scrambled. So the information in our book can't disappear forever into the black hole, never to be recovered. It must still exist somewhere accessible to us. Physicists say it is written on the so-called event horizon of a black hole, the two-dimensional surface that defines a point of no return. Likewise, physicists have proven that events occurring on a two-dimensional sheet are interchangeable with the description in 3 dimensions. Mathematically, it's all the same, which leaves us to wonder, which is real? The 3 dimensions we observe, or the two-dimensional description that makes the math work?
And if we are in a 3D holographic universe, it has to be projected from another dimension or another universe. Because you cannot have the holographic projector inside the hologram. And each detail in that 3D projection is produced from a different phase and amplitude of high frequency electrical and magnetic waves of light. There is an example of a projection of one of the mathematical constructs that physicists made about how we might be projected. And perhaps the first human to envision this universe as a projected hologram was Emanuel Swedenborg, who lived from 1688 to 1772 in Sweden and became best known for his 1758 book, Heaven and Hell. And it's been suggested to me that one of the things that has confused human history is that the Nordics that we resemble, especially all of those in Norway, Sweden, Finland, that ETs of the Nordics could have been working in the planet like Swedenborg, trying to get across to evolving humans that were not Nordics what the truth really was. Think about that if you ever decide to read Swedenborg and some of those before. They may very well have been Nordics working on the planet trying to educate. And it was Swedenborg who became famous for his ability to enter deep trances to leave his body. He said he went to heaven and conversed with angels. Swedenborg said he was surprised to find that in heaven there are also spirits from other planets, an amazing public statement that was printed more than 300 years ago. And like our 21st century efforts to understand the true nature of this universe, Swedenborg's out-of-body experiences provoked him to say that even though humans live life as separate from one another, that we are actually connected from the atomic level on up, and that takes us back full circle to bones, wholeness, and the implicate order, where from the subatomic to the macro, it is all the same wholeness and the implicate order, which is why the mouse neuron and the cubic galaxy look identical in those first 2 photos. Swedenborg saw that underlying the visible matter universe was a wave substance that connected every particle of the cosmos in wave frequencies. Could the all-connected wave substance of this multi-dimensional universe explain how some human minds can remote view other planets in our solar system, or see the future, or sense invisible danger, or receive telepathic communications from non-humans, or even move matter by focusing the mind's attention? And in the context of seeing the future, many viewers of my earthfiles.com news website and my Earthfiles YouTube channel broadcast on Wednesday nights have sent me letters and emails about dreams of massive floods inundating our planet, or seeing our entire sky around the whole planet on fire, water and fire. Some viewers have wondered if the flood dreams are subconscious metaphors for the awful global pandemic of COVID. But others think that it's an example of how human brains can resonate with the entangled frequencies of this universe and pick up signals from the whole cosmic fabric, often at the same time. A big part of that cosmic fabric are frequencies and mathematical shapes called fractals, like the spirals in this illustration. There is a man in Washington State who has been convinced that we are in a holographic universe after he was nearly murdered. His name is Jason Paget. Today, he is 55 years old. He had no education beyond high school, and he worked for his father in a mattress and sofa store. He had no interest in math and never heard the words holograms and fractals. But when Jason was 32 years old in 2002, he was nearly murdered during a vicious beating by thugs at a karaoke hangout in Tacoma, Washington. In the hospital after the attack, Jason's skull and brain were badly damaged, and suddenly he began to see everything around him in geometric patterns, moving like motion picture film. When I first interviewed him, I asked him, what were the first seconds that you remember when you became conscious? And he said, nothing, not my wife, not my kids, not the walls, nothing in front of me was flesh. It was all fractal patterns, everything. He went from a normal guy to the very rare condition of what's called acquired savant syndrome. That's when a person acquires remarkable musical, mathematical, or artistic abilities after a severe injury or disease that affects the brain. For Jason, he began to see shapes in his mind that were so beautiful that he had to try to draw them. Each fractal pattern emerged in his mind's eye in a different color. And using only a sharp pencil, ruler, and compass, Jason began hand drawing perfect fractal patterns. The green here, this is rare mathematical accuracy judged as such by physicists who have looked at his work, and that the perfection of his hand-drawn fractals led to a book released in 2014 entitled Struck by Genius, How a Brain Injury Made Me a Mathematical Marvel. Copyright 2014 by Jason Paget with Maureen Seberg. Struck by Genius was co-authored by Maureen, who is a writer for Psychology Today and Oprah Magazine. I've met and talked with her about her own investigation of him. He stands today as one of the most remarkable cases that they've ever investigated and written about. And Jason went from never having seen a fractal in his life, he had no idea, to now he is alive and living, and his brain is only processing everything around him in terms of fractals. And he said he realized that it was going from something that was static to he could be looking at people walking, cars moving, and the fractal patterns. That's what he was watching, but he knew that there was a surface, that the fractals were what made the surface that we would call people and cars. His brain even saw his own hand as a fractal pattern, and here is Jason's sketch of what he was seeing. There is a name for this brain condition that turns numbers into shapes like fractals, and it's called synesthesia. Fractals like this black Mandelbrot set pattern, bordered by branching Julia sets, were not even in public discussions until half a century ago in 1975. And that's when IBM mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot put a small equation in a big computer and ran it over and over for hours to see what would happen. He ended up with this remarkable shape that went into pattern after pattern after pattern that he called the Mandelbrot set of patterns. And that he found that this Mandelbrot would be bordered by the Julia set over and over. So two fractals that embraced each other infinitely. And the fractured pieces is what Mandelbrot contributed mathematically to universities, that he was now finding that there was what's called self-similarity. It didn't matter at what level in any fractal, it was all self-similar from the smallest to the largest, exactly replicating the same patterns from the smallest to the largest scales, back to the mouse brain tissue, up to the cubic galaxy. Again, it is from the micro to the macro. Everything is an extended scale to everything below and above. And that same self-similar pattern that is found in Mother Nature geometries like this nautilus shell, another spiral design, and when you take that and you look at a tree, this is another good example of real-life fractals that keep branching in a self-similar pattern. And the key to all this, and why, the explanation, if this universe is a hologram, if that's the true identity, and it's projected from another dimension, then the more that we study the fractal basis of the world around us, perhaps the more our own minds and languages will evolve to the point that we finally can communicate with advanced ETs. At the largest cosmic scales, galaxies also spiral in fractal patterns. And since his brain was battered in 2002, Jason Paget has continuously seen fractal patterns instead of hard matter surfaces. Even looking at his own skin, he sees nothing but fractal patterns. He thinks we're in a 3D holographic universe where the key to everything at every level is frequency. From the vibrating vacuum to fractals. Many universes and dimensions could exist simultaneously like notes in a chord of music. Think about that. That when you put your hand on a piano and you click on a chord, you have multiple frequencies that are vibrating at the same time, creating yet another frequency. Each frequency could be a different dimension. And some people, after encounters with non-humans, say they are told that human souls are recycled in and out of many different container bodies in different dimensions, where each dimension is a different frequency. And some UFO experiencers say that reincarnation, the recycling of souls, is the machinery of this universe. And here now is an excerpt from my discussion with Jason Paget when he was 46 years old and had been seeing fractals for 15 years. After the 2002 attack, what was the first difference that you noticed?
The smoothness of how things looked when they moved was gone. Have you ever drawn a flip book on pages where you draw a cartoon character and you changed it and then you flip the pages and it looks like the cartoon character is moving? Mm-hmm. It's like that, but in real time. So when you flip the pages, you can tell it's jumping from one spot to the next.
Right.
And our brains normally smooth out that jumpiness so it appears to be continuous. So even though it's not continuous, it's individual frames. And that's the way the universe works too.
You would see frames like we were looking at video or movie frames moving.
Yes, yes. My brain isn't smoothing them out. We are jumping through space-time. So there's like a million, billion picture frames per second in the real universe. That's that quantum leap that you always hear people talk about.
Is it true that you also are seeing pixelations the way we think of digital pixelations on a computer?
Exactly. That is what was one of the most beautiful things about it, is that it makes everything that moves look like it's moving relative to a grid. In fact, when light bounces off water, it builds a grid, what appears to be a two-dimensional hexagon lattice or a three-dimensional grid. And space-time is a three-dimensional grid structure. So imagine like a piece of graph paper in algebra. Space-time, it's like this 3D grid, and the pixels are something called the Planck length. The Planck length is the tiniest piece of space that can exist. There's nothing smaller can be observed than the Planck length. A good way to think about it is like, we want to observe something, we're hitting it with photons. The photons are emitted back and we see the geometry of what we're trying to observe. When you try to squeeze two light waves into a space that is smaller than the Planck length, it causes that tiny region of space to collapse into a black hole, which then absorbs the photons and there's nothing left to observe. So everything in the universe is made up of this exact Planck length. So think of the universe as being just like a TV screen where the tiniest of the pixels get are one Planck length, like squares with one Planck length on each side.
In the spring of 2016, there was a conference held back east in which Neil deGrasse and Elon Musk and others came together on the question, are we living in a digital computer simulated universe?
It definitely seems to operate exactly like the holographic universe principle. The holographic universe, you can overlay a grid of Planck length pixels like on the room that you're in, and what is on each one of those little pixels describes the reality.
Mm-hmm. If we are in a computer simulated universe created by some other advanced intelligence, what are we humans?
Everything is just pure geometry, and all the equations that exist are always describing geometry. So geometry or shapes is what math is.
Is it possible that the dark matter and the dark energy relate to this concept that we are actually in someone else's advanced intelligence experiment, a creation of a simulated computer universe?
It's possible. Physicists talk about how it could be different cosmological constants. A cosmological constant that's much bigger than one that we have would rip the universe apart, and one that was smaller would make the universe contract and collapse back into a singularity. If we were in a universe that didn't have this cosmological constant the way it is, it couldn't exist. Because those universes with a cosmological constant that aren't exactly as this one don't ever exist long enough for life to evolve.
Well, Good at Harvard has had the hypothesis that there are an infinite number of universes. We are in one. Is it possible that all the other universes, if they exist, have different physics?
Yes. When I think about how the universe and the multiverse works, every time I come down to thinking and believing, even though I can't prove it, I am a firm believer in the multiverse theory because it always comes down to fractals.
But who would set it in motion?
The one thing that just is geometry. And geometry is numbers. All equations are just geometry, and geometry is space. What you need to have space is nothing. The emptiness, vastness, nothing of space is geometry. And then you have all equations. When I talk to professors or friends, I always try to tell them, try to think of something that doesn't have geometry. Anything. And so far, nobody's ever been able to think of anything. Even thought itself is a brain wave that leaves our head. That's energy that interacts with things on a tiny quantum level. So it's geometry.
Do you think in your mind now, after being struck by genius, that there is a fractal structure to the universe? And what I'm thinking of is myself and many others were introduced for the first time to fractals through the crop formations going back to the 1980s and the early 1990s. One was the Mandelbrot that is defined on the edges by Julia sets.
Right.
If the Mandelbrot is defined on the edges by the Julia sets, is there something fundamental about the Mandelbrot and the Julia sets as a structure that our universe may mimic?
Absolutely. The definition of a fractal is it's a shape that when you decompose it into pieces, the pieces are the same as the whole. And so the universe, by being this giant 3D grid structure, breaks down into tiny little smaller 3D grid structures. This breaks into smaller grids. This breaks into smaller grids. So the universe itself is a perfect fractal. You take it apart into pieces, the pieces are the same as the whole. And the Mandelbrot set is an equation that is being put onto a computer screen grid.
Do you have any conceptual image that has ever come into your brain since you were beat up that you think comes close to what the actual universe structure is?
The way that I view everything is just basically as waves. And the universe itself is like a wave that is rippling outward, like a fractal.
I'm looking at your beautiful sketch. You call it the quantum hand. Is there a relationship in your illustration to what appears to look like light coming from the center of the hand to photons and to the concept that all matter is frozen light and that we are in essence photons?
Yes, I believe everything is light, and everything is moving through space-time exactly at the speed of light. So light is absolutely paramount to everything.
And is that why some people's hands can heal?
The more I get into it, the more I have a hard time discounting anything, because the universe is so much weirder than science fiction. I know that people who are positive heal faster, so our minds can do amazing things, and our bodies can do amazing things. When you think about the quantum weirdness of the universe, that you can be in an infinite number of places at once, that there's a multiverse, that we can be inside of a large computer program, to think that somebody could somehow do something like that isn't so strange anymore. And we know that space is geometry, and that is numbers. And we've also found that nothingness, the vacuum of space, vibrates with quantum fluctuations from uncertainty. And so now we have a vibrating grid structure of nothingness that always is, that will always vibrate from uncertainty, and that is infinitely large and infinitely small. I mean, you pretty much got the ingredients you need for all math, which is basically just a grid structure and something that allows things to at least appear to move across the grid. And the way that I'm describing the holographic universe principle, where each little pixel has a piece of Hawking radiation on it that is coming from the event horizon of a black hole.
Can you take all of this and move the track to the whole question of the soul that animates the biological containers?
I think of the soul as being like every tiny quantum movement and measurement of me. From the moment I'm born till the moment I die, that is me and my soul. Matter is energy. E equals mc squared. So matter literally is energy, and matter can become energy, and energy can become matter. They can switch back and forth forever, but they're never destroyed. That means the matter that is me has always been and always will be. It's been light, it's been in trees, it's been in everything. A lot of people talk about what happens after you die. But when you're dead, your energy is not in a form that can observe time. Time is meaningless. So we know that this universe is 13.8 billion years old. Do you remember waiting to be born? You were in dinosaurs, you were in stars, but to you, it was instantaneous. You've always existed. When you die, you can't observe time. So time is meaningless to you. So you don't notice that time go by, just like you don't notice the time waiting to be born. So to me, when you die, next thing you know, if there's an infinite number of Big Bangs, dying is being born. The next thing you would know is you're just popping into existence again in the next universe where it's identical to this one, but I'm left-handed. Every single possibility happens eventually in an infinite amount of time.
So the soul could be some sort of substance designed and made specifically to take all of the frequencies of a conscious life into it for recycling.
Yes, and the universe just automatically does that.
It was nearly 40 years ago. Did this go to sleep? I don't know. Do you want to try to see if you can get this to go? You got it? Okay, thank you. Nearly 40 years ago, the United States Army Intelligence and Security Command in Fort Meade, Maryland, was studying brain-mind techniques that included traveling out of body, even into outer space, and the concept of a holographic universe long before scientists recently have published serious papers about evidence that we are in a holographic universe, with the profound implication that every atom and photon is connected to all other atoms and photons. And this 1983 document came through a FOIA request to the CIA, which finally released the classified report in 2003. Paragraph 12 states about holograms, quote, "Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Dennis Gabor in 1947, and he later won a Nobel Prize for his work. A 2014 medical discovery supports a quantum hologram concept first put forth by mathematical physicist Sir Roger Penrose and his colleague anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, MD, in the late 1990s. Nobel Prize honored Penrose and Dr. Hameroff theorized that consciousness derives from quantum vibrations picked up from biological structures inside the human brain that resonate with human vibrations in the holographic universe. In 2014, microtubules were discovered inside brain neurons for the very first time that suggest there is what Penrose and Hameroff call, quote, orchestrated objective reduction, or the ORCOR, where synaptic inputs and memory are the products of microtubule vibrations that store the vibration information. Doctors Penrose and Hameroff said about the microtubule discovery, quote, "Our theory suggests consciousness derives from quantum vibrations in microtubules that are protein polymers inside brain neurons. Both govern neuronal and synaptic function and connect brain processes to self-organizing processes in the fine-scale proto-conscious quantum structure of reality," close quote. A lot of words that mean they discovered inside of human brains there are microtubules that are less than a millimeter, and yet they have a form of a tube, and that Penrose and Hameroff were the very first to write a paper hypothesizing that these newly discovered microtubules in the human brain are there specifically to vibrate with the frequencies of the environment, the space, the cosmos around the brain. Their argument is that the human mind is also a hologram, which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange in these frequencies between the microstructures of the brain and the macrostructures of the galactic universe. One of the scientists in the United States Army Consciousness and Hologram Study concluded, quote, contrary to what everyone thinks they know, it might not be the brain that produces consciousness, but rather consciousness is what creates the appearance of our brain. Close quote. And I wanted to end because I personally think this is some of the most important research that everybody should study. We are so much more than we have ever been taught. And there was an abductee that Bud Hopkins and I talked about at great length in the early 1980s, where we both met and talked, and to this day, I've always protected who he was, a scientist who was beamed out of his family's car, literally. They were on one of the freeways coming out of Manhattan celebrating a birthday. And the whole family, including the scientist, the car is moving, and then his father is slowing the car down. Simultaneously, as the car slows down to get off on the shoulder of the freeway, the scientist experiences being lifted right through the front window, going up to a red pulsing light in the sky that they had all been talking about. What is the red pulsing light in the sky? And the scientist who I talked to a great deal about this thought, because now he's not in body form, he knows that. He thinks, I want to see the car. And the stasis that he's in turns, and he now looks down and sees his father behind the steering wheel, knows his mother and his sister and her husband are in the back seat, and he sees his own body in the passenger seat next to his father. And what unfolds for him, it's very long and involved, but he ends up coming down in this, we'll call it a frequency state that he's in. And there are 12 beings with the black eyes, like the famous Ebens today. And I saw the videotape that Bud Hopkins did on him, in which on the sofa where he's doing the deep hypnosis about what happens, his legs, he starts kicking in the sofa, kicking hard, still under hypnosis. He's trying to stop coming down into the middle of these 12 beings. And he still today is alive and working in a laboratory in another part of the United States. He's kept in touch with me over all these years. And I just wanted to share a paragraph that he wrote me from an extensive, incredible abduction by beings who showed him holograms in their craft of our solar system and other parts of this universe. And this was one paragraph that I shared in my Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2. Quote, our universe is paired to another one, which is completely opposite of this one. There, the skies are glowing white with dark suns. Colors are indescribable and iridescent, and time flows to the past. Like a conveyor belt, at the moment of death in our universe, we move through a tunnel into the mirror universe where it is all light. And there, time moves to the past, and souls return back here. A constant moving, revolving, evolving resonance of frequencies. And I wanted to conclude with a paragraph that I wrote in my Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, that now when I look at my own words, they seem even closer to a truth. Perhaps the unique isolation each human feels and the peculiar melancholy that a dark sky filled with stars can evoke have something to do with knowledge buried in our genes and in our souls, a sensing of ancient intimacies with other beings in other worlds. And now in this time of revolution, when the whole world will know we are not alone in this universe, our greatest challenge as a species will be to stand up unafraid before the old lords and watchers. Ultimately, there is a common bond among all life forms, ebbing and flowing on spirals of different frequencies, supported by a singular force, an invisible matrix of energy from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. And that is the best insight that I can give you in 2023. Thank you.